In just about an hour, Benjamin Netanyahu will start his speech at the in front of the joint session of uh, the U.S. Congress, and well, some people will show up, some people won't. But much more interestingly, in 2 hours, Israel will take to the pitch in I believe it's the Parc des Princes in Paris for their first Olympic football or soccer match in 48 years. The Israeli football team has made it to that stage after some very impressive showings in the World Cup, the Under 20 World Cup, the Under 21 European Championship, and that's an exciting an exciting thing for football fans from Israel. Unfortunately, it's of interest also to those of us who care about Western civilization, especially in the face of the attacks on it, because where Jews go, those who want to kill Jews go, and where Israel goes, it's even a better opportunity to express that desire to exterminate the Jews without technically saying it, because you can say I'm only opposed to the policies of the state of Israel. So yes, Israel will be playing Mali at 8 p.m. UK time in 2 hours in Paris, and protests are planned. Now, those of us who are longtime football fans from Israel know that whenever an Israeli team or any sports team from Israel, unless it's you know such an unpopular sport that nobody knows about it, there's always protests. There are always protests where Israeli teams go in Europe, and but this is going to be a lot more than normal. There are going to be protests inside the stadium. I'm sure there are going to be protests outside the stadium. And again, the protesters are supporting terrorists, and terrorists are also around in France. So they don't really let us know typically what they're planning before they carry it out. But there is that added risk, which is why some of us who otherwise might travel the short 40-minute flight to Paris to see such a match have not even considered it. Welcome to the reality show. They were talking about the Olympics, about Israel's participation in the Olympics, how it fits into the history of anti-Semitism in Europe. Let's say the history of anti-Semitism in Europe post World War II, because the Nazis may have been defeated, but one of their most important ideas is still alive and well. I'm joined by Jonathan Honig and Kirk Wilcox. Kirk, your thoughts on this in the U.S.? I believe the next Olympic Games are in the U.S., right? But I'm not
Yeah, I
actually
think in
sure.
Los Angeles, right?
Oh yeah, that's well, I'll feel much safer traveling to Los Angeles than to Paris.
Yeah, if you recall when our governor, goofy ass Gavin Newsom, rolled out the red carpet for the dictator of communist China, Xi Jinping. Yeah, everything was nice in San Francisco for a few days. They cleaned up. I think the common joke is, hey, if you want to clean up the streets in San Francisco and California's other big cities, just invite a communist dictator to your state. Then all the tents and garbage just magically goes away. What else can you expect? But yeah, as far as this topic goes, it's not to play the whataboutism card immediately, but for all this talk about how Israel's engaging in genocide, I think that was one of the let's see. The article that was sent to me on this topic from The Guardian, written by Daniel Balfi and Angelique Chrysafis, mentions Suzanne Shields from Euro-Palestine, a French activist group which has been behind the recent demonstration, says there would be a peaceful protest inside the stadium against genocide in scare quotes. Yeah, they just loosely throw around that term and hope no one questions them. It's like, hey, we're just protest. We're not pro-terrorism, as Razi just mentioned earlier. We're just anti-genocide. We're anti-war. We just wanna we just have compassion for the innocents in Gaza or whatever. Maybe they can just turn the Olympics into the activism Olympics, because my goodness, you got communist China, you got Saudi Arabia. There's no shortage of countries that any activist group can legitimately go there to protest and, grandstand on. So why not? Let's just turn the Olympic Games. Let's forget about wrestling and soccer and basketball and swimming and weightlifting and track and field. Let's turn it into the activism Olympics. Which activist group has the most moral, righteous cause against their country of choice?
Jonathan.
Yeah, well, look, Palestinians, civilians are targets, Razi and Kirk, when they're stationed next to, Hamas missile sites or Hamas weapons depots. But Jews are targets everywhere, civilians everywhere, including at the Olympics. And, these Jewish athletes, I think American athletes, Western athletes more broadly, but certainly Jewish athletes, are real targets at high, big profile events like the Olympics. You only need to harken back to, 1972, the Black September absolute, massacre. That's, front of mind of many, certainly historians and should be front of mind of many of our readers or listeners. So, this is the issue. It's like Jews are allowed to be attacked, Razi. I mean, anti-Semitic attacks are up so dramatically in just the last couple of years. And what's so frustrating is that the resistance, they have the moral high ground, and so when they disrupt the Olympics with their stupid ass Palestinian flags and, booing the Jewish athletes or whatever, it'll say, well, they're real, and it's not, where are the hostages? Bring the hostages home. There's no actual justice. The Jews are considered immoral, Israel is considered immoral, and the resistance is, given the high moral ground.
Yeah, I mean, look, the hostage issue in the early days after October 7th, people were putting up posters, and those were torn down everywhere by those who supposedly care about the rights of humans in Gaza. And which brings me back, by the way, Kirk, to something you said, which is one of the things that annoy me the most when people pro-Israel say, which is, why are they, it's not exactly what you said, but you kind of suggested, well, why aren't they protesting against China, against Russia, against North Korea, all these countries that are represented? Well, it would be very inconsistent of them to protest against these countries when their focus is that one sliver of land in the Middle East, in the cesspool that is the Middle East, that respects rights. And they are protesting against that one country because it, not just because it respects rights, but because it defends itself against a country or a de facto country that doesn't respect the rights of its own people and it basically exists in order to exterminate another people. So yeah, they can use the words rights all they want. They can use the word genocide as something they supposedly oppose all they want, but no, they are knowingly on the side of genocide, on the side of killing and causing suffering to innocent civilians.
Can I just say,
Yeah, and
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
go on.
I was just say that
No.
Rand's quote about, good and evil in the middle is, what is her quote about, there's good and evil in the middle?
There's two sides to every issue, a right side and a wrong side, but the middle is always evil. That's not an exact quote, but it's something like that.
Something that effect, right? And it kind of reminds me of this. It's like, Israel on this issue is in the right and the protesters are in the wrong. But, we try to find some balance in between the two, and you end up sanctioning evil, and legitimizing evil and allowing evil to fester and to win and not standing up for the good. A synagogue in a neighborhood where I grew up, they have out all the chairs of however many hostages are still, or however many hostages. A simple sign, bring them home. And like, why isn't that front and center at the Olympics? We believe in the right of every human. We ask that, all hostages being held around the world, be brought. That's not being tried. Instead, Israeli athletes are booed. They're going to be booed.
Yeah, and on top of that, they have to get this 24-hour security service from France And I guess I've read that Israel traditionally has always brought security, especially ever since 1972, what happened in Munich. But I guess France is, and I think I read some other article on The Guardian about how they have a 1,000 French police guard perimeter, anti-terror perimeter at the Olympic opener. And this is all because of Israel. No one else. I guess Israel's the only one that's expected to have the security. What does this say about the anti-Israeli movements and activist groups? And you don't see this with any other country. How many times have I heard the inspiring story about Team USA, the hockey team, overcoming the odds and beating the juggernaut that was the Soviet Union hockey team. I think it was 1980 or 1982, forget which year, sorry. But I don't remember like hearing about how like the Soviet Union, which was an evil regime, communism, they were responsible for no shortage of atrocities. I don't remember ever hearing like any part of that story being like, oh, there were a bunch of like anti-communist, anti-Soviet protesters, especially considering that, height of the Cold War, being part of that story. And it was just like, no, you had this juggernaut of a hockey team from the Soviet Union because I think they were able to exploit certain loopholes where they were to have like quasi-professional hockey players going up against a bunch of college kids from the United States, and it turned into one of the most inspiring sports stories, arguably the most inspiring sports story in the history of modern times.
But no one thought that the Soviets would pop off the players, shoot off the players. But the Palestinians, and I believe the Palestinian people would love to see that. They would love to see, Razi, I don't know whether you agree that this is certainly not objectivism, but for them to commit an atrocity against an Israeli fan or an Israeli athlete at a high profile event like an Olympics would be seen like, grabbing a scalp. It would be like getting a trophy. I mean, it would really, they would be considered really, I think, real heroes and martyrs in that community. And, who was really worried about Israeli athletes or spectators committing violent acts at the Olympics? No, zero risk.
I mean, 4 days ago, I saw, mainstream journalists and politicians in this country celebrating the fact that somebody who was sleeping in his home was killed in a drone attack on Tel Aviv, because that was a successful attack after hundreds of unsuccessful attempts. 4 days ago was the response. Maybe it was five or 6 days ago. So yeah, of course, if somebody who's actually representing Israel, wearing the flag, even if it's in a sports competition and not war, if an attack is successful, there is no doubt there will be celebrations everywhere. There were celebrations, I'm sure, in 1972 when 11 of the Israeli delegation to the Munich Olympics were murdered, this I think is a more hostile environment than there was back then.
I just think it's really wrong that these Israeli athletes or that singer from Eurovision, it's kind of like the European Star Search. Am I correct? Dating myself with that reference, but
I'm not sure about Star Search. Eurovision is kind of big in some countries and more of a joke to others, like Britain, like Sweden, Sweden.
But
considers
that
it
wonderful young Israeli singer, I think there was threats against her. There was a lot, and these athletes have to not only worry about performing in the games, but actually worry about security. And as Kirk pointed out, have all this extra security because why? They're from the only rights respecting country in the entire Middle East.
Yeah.
And they're the target.
Thank you, Christopher, and thank you, Jeff, for the super chats. Yeah, we talked about the Eurovision at the time, but it's really worth repeating because you have this 20-year-old girl representing Israel in a song competition, and she can't leave her hotel unless it's for the rehearsals or the competition itself. When she does, she needs to be accompanied by 100 police officers, because otherwise she will be murdered by the kind of people you just have in Malmo in Sweden, the one of the worst cities in Europe when it comes to the Islamic, let's say, not takeover, but presence. And people traveled, thousands of people traveled there, especially to protest against her. She was booed when she sang in the rehearsals. She was booed when she sang in the semifinal and in the final. In the press conference, you see her sitting with other singers, and some of them make faces. One of them, pretends to fall asleep and so on, and yawns. The others didn't talk to her. There's this the Finnish singer who represented Finland the year before was filmed talking to her and doing some sort of dance with her in backstage somewhere, and he apologized for it. I mean, the atmosphere for her to say, look, the Holocaust didn't happen because one day a bunch of people woke up and decided to kill the Jews. There was an atmosphere, and this was that atmosphere. Kirk.
Yeah, and I'm just imagining, like, especially like when you watch a lot of these stories about like specific Olympians. I know like a few years ago they came out with a movie about Tanya Harding, who
Nancy
I
Kerrigan.
think Margot Robbie played her in the movie. It was a good movie, but it's like for a lot of athletes, like this is going to be like their the pinnacle of their life. They're in their youth and they've been training hard. They train really. I just watched the other day the WWE Legends episode on Kurt Angle. For those who don't know, he was a real wrestler, Olympic athlete, Olympic gold medalist, and then went to do WWF. For all people, wrestling's fake, no one cares. um Also, another part of that was he beat an Iranian in the finals for the gold medalist.
With a
Again, like
broken freaking
Iran,
neck, by the way.
with a broken freaking neck. Yeah. And I like, Iran was, for as much as Iran considered the United States this great Satan or whatever, and they took American hostages in 1979 and never got over it. It's like they still they thought America was this great Satan, yet they send their athletes to the United States in 1996 to compete in the Olympics. I don't recall that being a part of the whole 1996 Olympics, any like anti-Islamic, anti-Iranian protests or whatever. No, we just let him compete. And yeah, Kurt Angle beat an Iranian in the finals with a broken freaking neck for the gold medal. But no, but for I mean, I just remember like part of the whole Kurt Angle story was like he was training, like he had a crazy training regimen, and like that was his focus, was to win the gold medal. For a lot of these athletes, it's going to be like the pinnacle of their life. And this is what they're looking forward to, what they're working their butts and their ass for. And now imagine if you're an Israeli athlete. Now you got to deal with all this, all these protests and this hostility, when like this is supposed to be like the happiest, it's supposed to be like the biggest payoff of your life. And now you got to deal with all this nonsense. It's ridiculous.
Without a doubt. And Jonathan, I don't know how much of this is known outside of Israel, but Israelis, they one of the Olympic sports that Israelis tend to do well in is judo. There have been multiple instances. Certainly, if an Israeli is drawn against an Iranian,
They
and
won't,
they
they
don't,
won't go up against them.
they won't go up against him. That's same as true as for some Arab countries. They just won't allow it. And in football or soccer, Israel and Israeli teams used to compete in Asian competitions. Now they compete in European competition, which for those of us who are fans, it's also much more interesting because it's a much tougher competition. But the team I support, Maccabi Tel Aviv, won the Asian Champions League or whatever it's called twice way back because teams wouldn't play against them and they won by forfeit, basically. So yeah, that is the atmosphere that Israel and Israelis and Jews in general are used to when dealing with people in Asia and certainly in the Middle East. But now that is the atmosphere now in Europe. So maybe they will compete against Israelis, but they will compete against Israelis as if there's something wrong with the people they're up against.
You shouldn't have to feel as if your life is threatened walking down the street. Whether you're in Tel Aviv, like just walking down the street thinking, one of these 200 plus drones or missiles are haphazardly going to come in, i.e. actually targeting civilians. Or if you're, as Kirk pointed out, an accomplished athlete who's worked your whole young life to finally be there at the Olympics to maybe beat that record by like a half split second, and you're worried about, a 72 style massacre, which ironically, it's been a while, and I think our audience should go and watch some of that footage and watch some of the documentaries about, especially our younger viewers who might not know what happened in 72. Ironically, it seems almost tame. I mean, I assume these people were shot. That seems almost tame compared to what happened, the absolute butcherous atrocities on October 7th, like and documented atrocities. But, it's not right that these athletes and these spectators, you hold up the Israeli flag in one of these Olympic stadiums. I don't know. Do you guys think something's going to happen? I don't want to put, the evil eyes type hex on it, but that's what I'm saying. It's like, my belief is that the Israelis, the British, by and large, the Americans want to go and just have like a fine Olympics, no attacks, no senseless political violence. But as I said, I think many in the Middle East and many Europeans and just many Jew haters would love to see some type of attack. Do you think something's going to happen?
I mean, I would love it if what we were talking about today, maybe not on the show because I'm not sure it's show material, but is the the opening ceremony in a couple of days. The opening ceremony of the Olympics is always this overly extravagant thing. In London 2012, they used it for some propaganda about the NHS, but it was still extravagantly done. That's what I like to hear talking about. I like to focus on the football that's happening today, 2 days before the opening ceremony. But yes, I think absolutely, I worry about what might happen to the athletes, and they're going to be surrounded by security. Yes, if somebody just walks around with an Israeli flag, they don't even have to be targeted by a terrorist who's planning an attack. They can be targeted by any of these protesters or just any random person. I'm sure that if I walk out of the office today draped in an Israeli flag, walk in any direction, I won't make it, 10, 15 minutes without getting physically attacked.
Right. And maybe even it's like we always think these high profile, like Black September style attacks, not to put myself on any level, but like I've told this story before, a number of years ago, I was attacked by a group of pro-Palestinians, and the long story short, thrown to the ground with a real mild concussion or whatever. I mean, my AirPods were shattered and like, physical violence. So even if it's not something high profile, you make yourself a target when you walk out with an Israeli flag or identifying yourself with Israel. And I just hate that because, Razi, as you pointed out, even if you're not a scholar on the Middle East, right here, right now, Israel is the only rights respecting country in the entirety of the Middle East. And they have the moral low ground. And those who protest them have the moral high ground. So if you walk out with the Palestinian flag, everyone's like, oh yeah, they're really in the Israeli flag. It's like, yeah, Israel really has gone too far. They're really overreacting to butchery, to savagery, to hostages continuing to be held, to missiles flying in all the time that we don't even hear about. Israel's overreacting. Fuck that.
Kirk.
I think the real injustice here is Razi keeps referring to soccer as football. And I keep getting confused because I'm like, wait a minute, since when is football in the it's like he's talking about soccer. Why do you keep why do you call the sport for what it is?
Well, we also spell center in Ayn Rand Center UK with the E at the end instead of the R at the end.
That was just a spelling mistake you were going to fix in the That's actually purposeful. All right. Interesting.
All right, this triggered a whole argument in the chat, but so much of this, I like to say that because of my job, I have the fortune of living in kind of an objectivist safe space. I don't have to interact with this kind of stuff beyond reading it in the news, getting pissed off, and coming up with something to say on a show. But it's so easy, I think, for the random person to just going about their daily life, looking at some news story. I do this all the time. There are news stories. I look at the headline and I'm like, okay, I don't need to know anymore. I don't care, or I care a little bit. Maybe I'll read the first paragraph. People who do that, who look at the war in the Middle East with that approach, will undoubtedly end up being anti-Israel. Certainly, if they're not coming at it from a rational perspective, but just a okay, look, innocents are dying, and actually, yeah, I'll ask you guys to comment on it because I want to find this thumbnail of a news story that showed up in my YouTube recommendations a few days ago that I think pretty much captures it. So yeah, Kirk, your thoughts on that? Uh, if you said something, I couldn't hear it.
Said what?
Oh,
Oh,
no, I like you said something about a video. I'm like, I don't remember watching a video.
no, I was gonna show a thumbnail of a video that showed up in my recommendations that kind of
Oh,
but yeah, if you have anything to say about that while I do that, or
oh,
Jonathan.
I will
Yeah.
say on a positive note, I remember during the production meeting, I was spitballing. And I was like, well, would someone like a Benjamin Netanyahu even be allowed to go to the Olympics? I remember hearing these stories about how like all these European countries are like signed on with these like international courts, and there are all these like warrants out for like different politicians' arrests or whatever. But according to The Guardian, I guess President Emmanuel Macron said in a TV interview with France 2 on Tuesday that he profoundly disagrees with Benjamin Netanyahu, but that the Israeli prime minister would be welcome to attend the Olympic ceremony in Paris if he wanted to. So there, I guess maybe that's good news that Netanyahu can go to France and not expect to not be arrested by some of these goofy ass international organizations that France may or may not be signed on to.
Well, I don't know. That seems like that's like at best now you're pro-Israel, but just anti-Netanyahu. It's the same thing as like being, well, we're pro-Israel, but anti-Zionism, or they say we're not against Jews, we're just against Zionists. Well, what about this actual conflict right here, right now? And that's what I'm saying. It's like there's no acknowledgement. These hostages, which it seems like every day it's trickled out, like, yeah, a couple more are dead, a couple more are dead. They're just seen as hostages, like metaphysically hostages, as if they've always been hostages. It's just that that's what they are. Like there's no day after day after day, there's no demand by any of these bodies. I wouldn't say the Olympics, but certainly how about the UN or anyone else to like absolutely bring these complete innocent people home? It's like, so that's what just so like, just maddening to me. It's like day after day goes by, these hostages are dying, certainly being abused, certainly being mistreated. There was a New York Post story today, just out in the last couple hours, about a male rape victim from October 7th, describing that. There's like no acknowledgement of that. No, let's boo the Israeli pole vaulter or pole jumper because he's from Israel. Why Israel? Well, I guess they are the only rights respecting modern democracy advanced country in the Middle East. No, let's boo them.
Yeah, and I don't see the fact that the French president said he's not going to arrest Israel's prime minister if he comes to watch Israelis compete in the Olympics. I don't see that as a positive. The very fact that he would say something like that, who would consider arresting the leader of a free country coming to another free country, supposedly free country, to watch a sports competition while the country, that country is under attack? That it's so. And again, back to this point that I really don't like. But did he say that about anybody else? Did he say if he's going to arrest the Chinese premier? Did he say if he's going to arrest, any of these savage leaders in the Middle East?
I want to make something clear. I think the whole arresting thing that was based on like my like wild speculation. That's because I remember like when all these like decisions and all these speculations from like these different international courts, it's like, oh, whatever country is like signed on to that, like if like an Israel politician or a member of the IDF like happens to travel that country, they might be subject to arrest. I don't think the article mentions that Macron doesn't really mention anything about getting arrested. He just says that Netanyahu would be welcome in Paris if he wanted to come, but Yeah,
Yeah.
I still get your point though.
Yeah, but still, why is that a point being made? Again, and again, even the, let's say the arrest is not an issue. Is that a point that he makes about any other country? Because again, this is if you
Right. Like,
are
why should he feel like that's even for a minute? He should be welcome. He should feel supported. He should have sympathy. He should have empathy. It's
Yeah, I
like,
guess if we were to think like in 2028, if like say Trump was president in 2028, and then he's like, yeah, Justin Trudeau would be welcome to come to the opening ceremony. It's like, why would you feel the need to say that? Like wouldn't you feel weird if like he had to say that about like say Justin Trudeau or uh who some other like ally that the United States is allies with, friends with, and their head of state, like, oh yeah, of course they'd be welcome. It's like, well, yeah, why wouldn't they? Like, so
Yeah,
yeah,
Kirk, I hate to disappoint you and sorry for the spoiler. Justin Trudeau will not be the Prime Minister of Canada in 2028. But
well,
yes, the point is still relevant.
there's going to be like, look, I even think in countless towns and townships and villages, we've seen people make this big stink about they want a proclamation against Israel in, like, podunk or whatever. And certainly even where I live in Chicago, there's been countless disruptions where they come down and they march through streets in the middle of very active times. So, the point is to make a disruption. So this is a world stage in Europe. And, it does seem like there's going to be an opportunity for some type of disruption. I just hope that it's not violence. And, it's like, it's egalitarian, right? Everyone, I suppose, is welcome at the Olympics. I mean, Hitler, right? Isn't there like famous shots of Hitler, at the Olympics?
Well, the Olympics
they
was
hosted the
in
Olympics.
Berlin in 36. So yeah, he was the host. Yeah, I don't know if he would he would have said that the if Israel had been around back then that the Israeli prime minister is welcome, but yeah, that does show you kind of where Europe has come in the past century, and it's not that far. I mean, the good things in Europe, I always say the good parts of Europe, or the good aspects of Europe, certainly politically, are the things we copy from the US. And there's less and less of that in the US, unfortunately, to copy. It's mostly from whatever still remains of the principles that the country was founded on. I want to go back though to my point about how the random person and regular viewers of this channel will know that I can't be accused of giving excuses to people. But I do think it's important to look at how just a mainstream news channel, this again, I don't remember what I was watching, but in the recommendations on the YouTube app, underneath this was something I took a screenshot of, that was a story from Channel 4 in the UK. I have said that Channel 4 will get its own show, its own episode of this show at some point soon. Maybe we'll do one on this. But Daniel, do you have that? There it is. So this is a thumbnail of a news story about a war. So first of all, I'm sure the headline could have been different, and certainly the 400,000 residents ordered to leave Khan Yunis is they there's only so much you can say in a headline, and they selected what they wanted. But of course, for the picture, it's kids running away crying. This is not news about the war. This is telling you, you know what? You are either on the side of these kids or you are on the side of the people killing these kids. This is what a thumbnail like this tells you. This is what it tells you to think. And this is the media that we're dealing with. And before I go to you guys for comments on this, I just want to quickly say, all right, we've seen the children enough. We know we're at fault for everything, but for Friday's episode of the reality show, we're gonna cover a story that we covered last week with the attack of the so-called attack with a dog that killed a person with Down syndrome in Kirk. I believe you were on that episode, right? And yeah, you know, everything about that story, as we said at the time, was flawed. And what you will hear on Friday's episode of this show is just how intentionally flawed it was, Kirk.
Yeah, that's good. I know I bring this up often when coming on these shows, but this is Leonard Peikoff's "A Picture Is Not an Argument," which I would recommend all the viewers go listen to at some point, where he goes into detail about this topic and how stuff like this, it really short circuits your conceptual faculty. Because yeah, if you just see pictures of kids suffering, you don't have to think about stuff like, what about the hostages that are being held in Gaza? What about this broader conflict? What about what Hamas is fighting for and what they're standing for? What Hamas's allies, whether it be the Houthis or Hamas or the Islamic Republic of Iran, and their role in all of this, and what Israel's fighting for, which is the who are the good guys and the bad guys in this conflict? Are there even good? No, it's just look, there are people suffering in this war, and suffering is bad, and you should want this war to stop, and you don't have to really think much about it other than that.
And I wonder and I worry if, as I understand, Israel has been acknowledging or even entertaining any sort of so-called ceasefire, that you're going to see more and more of the uh, uh, attacks on, it's like, well, Israel has hit civilians. Oh yeah, well, exactly right. Like when that civilian location was parked next to a missile depot or weapons depot or planning facility or whatnot. But like, I think that you're going to see more attacks against legitimate actual civilians, i.e. Israeli uh, athletes. The more and more Israel, the country, I think, entertains ceasefires and entertains deal making with butchers, and that's what you're seeing.
Yeah, the negotiators have delayed their trip to Qatar, that fair and balanced um, mediator in the negotiations, until after Netanyahu was back from Washington. But yeah, this is always the negotiation about a hostage deal is always about when will Hamas decide that it's time? Because Israel has already capitulated on everything. Israel is just giving in as far as that negotiation is concerned, and that, of course, tells the whole story when it comes to that, and when it comes to the kind of people that going back to our main story, the kind of people that you will see protesting, the kind of people that you will see maybe attacking Israelis. Um, none of that is relevant in any way. So if Israel fought properly against the Palestinians, they would cry genocide. When Israel sends its own soldiers to die so that Palestinian civilians will not be harmed, they cry genocide. When Israel negotiates and offers, huge number of terrorists to be released from prison in exchange for innocent civilians, they say kind of like what Kay Burley said with the November hostage deal, which was 150 terrorists for 50 innocent civilian hostages being released. She said, "Well, are you saying the life of an Israeli is worth 3 times the life of a Palestinian?" There is nothing Israel can do right. We also talked about this BBC report a week ago, or not report, interview, where the interviewer said to the other person from the Israeli side or pro-Israel, something to the effect of, well, Hezbollah is only firing at Israel because they are concerned about the attacks on Palestinian civilians. Like, we have a media that is united behind the cause of Islamic terrorism. This is, as a time in our history, this should be terrifying, and again, the reason we're talking about the Olympics is because people will be openly Israeli there, which they're generally not nowadays when Israelis are in Europe. People will be openly Israeli and therefore will be targets. And the reason they're targets is because the media, academia, the political class are united behind the cause, even if they won't put it in these terms because they don't speak directly, united behind the cause that maybe the things that Europe tried in a part of the previous century should be allowed or encouraged again, especially if somebody else does it and we just support them and maybe condemn from time to time when they go a bit too far.
I want to just quickly jump in and on your behalf, I think, Razi, and certainly Kirk as well, thank Bonnie Bertrand, El Rito, Jesse, Reich Bach, who are all YouTube subscribers to the Ayn Rand Center UK. So it's just a couple of pounds or a couple of dollars a month to keep 7 days a week worth of programming inspired by Ayn Rand's objectivism. And, Kirk has recommended a couple of resources. Razi's recommended a couple of resources. So our whole hope every day is to try to bring some of Miss Rand's perspective and her philosophy to the events of the day. And Razi, I'm sure you have this at your fingertips. Miss Rand donated to Israel when they were attacked back in the 1970s, I believe.
Oh, I'm muted. Yes, you want me to read the quote of why? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just please do. I mean, she openly supported and donated, and I just thought, that's the irony. Nowadays, people say, well, what would Rand be saying in today's conflict? Israel has to worry about being a target and is being shunned and is being denounced. Meanwhile, Rand, when she was alive, donated to Israel. Share that quote if you will.
Yeah, I'll read part of it because it is the better part of a page, but the part in terms of where why she judges this conflict the way she does judge it, and this is in a Q&A in 1973, and the question is about the war in 1973, which is the Yom Kippur War. She says, why are the Arabs against Israel? This is the main reason I support Israel. The Arabs are one of the least developed cultures. They are still practically nomads. Their culture is primitive, and they resent Israel because it's the sole beachhead of modern science and civilization on their continent. When you have civilized men fighting savages, you support the civilized men no matter who they are. And I have to say, in this context, we do have seemingly it's we hear more of this kind of reporting like we see from Channel 4 when it comes to Israel. But we saw it with the Iraq War. We saw it even with Afghanistan. It seems like the mainstream approach is when you have civilized men fighting savages, you support the savages no matter who they are. That is the mainstream approach nowadays. And it can only lead in one direction unless we reverse course. Kirk, before I go to you, I want to quickly read Stedman's comment here. He says, Razi, go to Preston Stewart video from yesterday about that move into Khan Yunis. He shows a graphic that shows the 58 rocket launch sites. You should find that graphic from the IDF. Okay, I can look at that, but I don't need to. That's the thing. I know the way the IDF operates, and I've said on a daily basis since October 7th, I think it's insufficient. I don't think they should go out of their way to say to people, move from here to there. I don't think they should start with ground operations, which might achieve the goal and certainly put soldiers at risk. I think if they know, they should strike, and they should strike from the air or from afar, where soldiers are not put at harm. But I also know the way the media will report this. I didn't click that video. And these news outlets will typically say at the end, the IDF says it is fighting terrorism, blah, 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 after they give you 10, 15 minutes of kids crying. So yeah, we know how, we know the goals of these types of reporting. And just another quick point, Kirk, before I go to you, Mark Thomas, thank you for the super chat. Mark says or asks ways to get in touch with Ayn Rand Center for Policy. So there is a link there that Daniel put in the chat. You can contact us through that link. Kirk.
Yeah, I know we're coming to the conclusion of today's show here soon, and I guess I'll just take this opportunity to say, yeah, this is the Olympics. Usually I root for just Team USA, but now given recent events, I'll be rooting for Team Israel, and along with that, Team Ukraine and Team Republic of China.
Nice. By the way, I have to say, I remember in 2012 for the Olympics, uh, they had in Regent Street in London, which is people who know central London connects to Oxford Street. Oxford Street at the time was the busiest shopping street in the world, and I think Regent Street may have been the second busiest. They had the flags of all the countries in the Olympics, and there was some issue with the flag of Taiwan, which of course I don't remember if they wanted to compete as Taiwan or the Republic of China, but eventually I believe it was then that they had to compete as under the name Chinese Taipei. So
Yeah,
maybe
they're not allowed to fly the Taiwanese. They're not allowed to use the Taiwanese flag at the Olympics.
yeah. So yeah, there is consistency in that sense, which is yeah, where civilized men are at war with savages, the side that is commonly taken is the side of savages. Jonathan.
Well, actually, Razi, you read a great quote. Wasn't the one I was thinking of. I mean, there's a quote when Miss Rand talks about explicitly, I believe, donating to Israel. We can share it, or we can share it in the link, or we'll talk about it in the future. But like Kirk, I'll be cheering for Israel and really just hoping. I mean, 73. I don't know how it's perceived in the Middle East. I saw a video I think you shared on X, Razi, where a comedian or interviewer went and interviewed people about life in Palestine right now, and many of them seem very content with Hamas, very content with the murder of Jews, truly innocent Jews. And that's why I can't say I'm a big Olympics guy. My interest kind of feigned with Katarina Witt in 1985, I think that was. But and she was East German, I'm sorry to say. But I'll certainly be really, really uh, uh, hoping isn't the right term. I mean, I will just please let's not have any type of violence, and let's just cool it with all this ridiculous political virtue signaling. These young people have come to show their athletic abilities. Let's leave it at that. And
Yeah, I'll say what I said also on X at the time of the Eurovision, where the Israeli singer was booed, and I tweeted that people should vote for Israel, and I said let's give the people who paid some of their hard-earned money for a ticket to the Eurovision another reason to boo. Make sure she gets into the final, gets to sing her song again, and my hope for the Israeli Olympic team specifically in football, but also in anything else, is that they do well so that we keep seeing them. The people who paid money to boo them get to keep booing them. Maybe they'll get to boo the Israeli national anthem a few times if Israel wins some gold medals. And Jonathan, you asked for that quote. Basically, it's the same thing. It's just later on. So what I didn't read was the part where she says Israel is a mixed economy inclined towards socialism. But when it comes to the power of the mind, the development of industry in that wasted desert continent versus savages who don't want to use their mind, then if one cares about the future of civilization, don't wait for the government to do something. Give whatever you can. This is the first time I've contributed to a public cause helping Israel in an emergency. I think this is a somewhat different situation. Here, what we need is to stand up to our governments and say, this is unacceptable. We're not going to manufacture weapons to send to Israel. I think Israel can handle that to a great degree on its own. But yeah, we should tell the government, look, some people are loud and block the streets, but there are other views, and they are better for us in the long run.
moral. You don't need to send Israel a check, but just voice some moral support as Rand enunciated. Especially at a time in which 72, I think is fresh in a lot of people's minds for many reasons.
Yes, Jonathan Honig says in the chat that he was referring to Katharina Witt, smoking hot East German in 1985, smoking hot in all caps. Um, I will Google that. Kirk.
And second John's point, like that's one of the overarching themes of Atlas Shrugged, that ideas and morality, that's where the real power comes from. It's not necessarily money or the biggest weapons or the best technology, although you do need reason, science, and the mind to produce that in the first place. But if you don't have the moral fortitude, the moral confidence, then the biggest guns in the world and all the money in the world is useless.
Well, look, like you said, yeah, Israel's showing moral support for Israel. By the way, since we gave the Eurovision example, it's good to remind people that many in Europe were really disgusted with what was going on and voted for Israel. And Israel, while we don't know the actual breakdown of the votes, we know them by points given per country. Considering that Israel got the maximum 12 points from, I think, the 9 most populated countries or something like that in Europe, it's safe to assume Israel got the most votes by a great margin. And again, it's a shame, although I think the song was pretty good, at least by Eurovision standards. It's a shame that that's what people have to vote on in such competitions. But it's also a nice way of showing that, you know what, not everybody in Europe doesn't have to go back in time to what it was 100 years ago or 80 years ago. It can go forward, and that movement forward can be expressed in cultural events like the Eurovision, like the Olympics. So let's hope we see some of that, and it'll be interesting to see if there are people who actually say, you know what, we're going to cheer for Israel because they are the civilized people who are under attack from savages.
Yeah, I mean, Nikos literally wrote the book on tribalism. I'm sure you have it there. Mine's on the wall somewhere around here. And it's just too bad now that it's even the enjoyment of sport has become so kind of tribal in that sense that it's kind of infiltrated by politics and by threats. We started out this of kind of remembering the Olympics, dark European history, and it's like it really becomes this opportunity for people to target innocent athletes, and I'm deadly kind of afraid that we could see any type of another incident. It doesn't have to be a big widespread plot, although I do get a sense that there are subplots underway. But any type of even localized violence, and Raza, to your point, to Miss Rand's point, what's changed from her comments is that, what was that, 73? Israel is much less socialist than it was back then, much less. Israel's progressed. It's the Palestinians, it's the Arabs which haven't. They're stuck in the same mire as they were 40 years ago.
They're not stuck. The Palestinians at least went backwards, significantly backwards, and they went backwards with the encouragement of those who supposedly care about them, including Israel. So back in the 70s and the 80s, Israelis used to go shopping in Gaza because it was cheaper. And now we live in the what I call, not half fully sarcastically when I refer to people born around the late 80s, early 90s. I refer to them as the peace generation, the ones born in Israel, because all they've known is peace since the 1993 Oslo Accords, the peace that was signed back then, and the results of that peace, which is suicide bombings, rocket attacks, and October 7th. That is what this generation knows in Israel. That is what Palestinians have been educated for decades. So yeah, they have gone back. Israel has gone forward. And just quickly, you mentioned this video that I shared on X of Palestinians being interviewed, this man on the street stuff. Yeah, that will be the topic of the Daily Objective on Friday. Also, the campaign on the Adidas campaign with Bella Hadid, the 1972 Munich Olympic retro campaign. They chose somebody who was calling for the murder of Jews now. They took it back. Now she's suing them. That's going to be the topic tomorrow on the Daily Objective. For the reality show tomorrow, we don't know what the topic is. Unfortunately, things are what they are, and we have to wait and see what happens with Netanyahu's speech, what happens in Israel's football match today. I really hope, as I say from time to time, that maybe nothing interesting will happen and we can go back to talking about how environmentalists tell us to save the planet by stopping flushing the toilet. But I doubt that's going to be the topic tomorrow. I do think it's going to be something Israel related. But on today's topic, any final thoughts, Kirk?
Go USA, go Israel.
Jonathan.
Yeah, and just thanks to the supporters who, as I said, Razi, thanks to you and your team have, built a daily resource for people who are interested in the world and engaging in it in a thoughtful manner and learning more about Miss Rand's ideas. So take this opportunity to support us and what we're doing, and also to pick up anything by Ayn Rand and begin your discovery of her ideas from her works.
And also, where can people find more from you, Jonathan?
Well, my new book is called Can You Really Love a Dog? And it was authored with Dr. Leonard Peikoff, who is Ayn Rand's intellectual heir. It's all about our love for pets. So please pick it up at Amazon.
And Kirk?
Yeah, you can find me on Elon Musk's website at Kirk Wilcox, and my YouTube channel, which I think is already linked in the description. And yeah, I'll throw out a video recommendation today that I've done. Operation Ajax, Iran's Game of Thrones. Go check that one out if you guys are curious in my work.
You had me at Game of Thrones, or you had me at Iran. I'm not sure. I'm Razi Ginsburg on X. We will be back here tomorrow. See you then.